Danny Clinch, without a doubt, is one of the premier music photographers working today. For more than 3 decades, he has chronicled everybody from Dylan to Johnny Cash, Tupac, Phish, Neil Young, Patti Smith, and of course, Bruce Springsteen. And in the process of that time, anyone who was involved with modern American music is likely to have been shot by Danny Clinch. And he's also chronicled a lot of public and a lot of private significant events that we are fortunate enough today to get to hear some of the stories behind those images. Without further ado, Danny, I'll make sure I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome. Hey.
Are we here?
Thanks for being with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. Yeah, as good as can be expected.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing some stories with us. And, you know, we've got a selection of images to go through, quite a few images, but I felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't go back just a little bit and ask you to share your beginnings, not only in photography, but as a son of a biker in New Jersey. You grew up in Toms River?
Yeah, Toms River, New Jersey. Yeah, that's correct. And that one on the left is me and my dad in 1965. I was born in 64. And my dad actually ended up having to sell that motorcycle because we needed some screen windows for the house because my sister was allergic to mosquito bites. And
Wow.
as you can tell by his leather jacket, he wasn't very happy about that, but he did it anyway.
But I mean, you continue, or you still ride motorcycles today?
I do. I don't own one, but there, you know, as you can see on the right, I used to, I grew up on a motorcycle ever since I was about 5. And I raced a little bit of motocross on that bike right there. And I raced flat track and just did a lot of trail riding. And that van behind me was my father's van. He was a house painter and a paper hanger. And every work vehicle that he bought, whether it was this old Econoline or like a bread truck, he would buy these old trucks and he would paint them all the same color, which we call Max Clinch Blue. And I have a hashtag on Instagram for Max Clinch Blue.
Very good. Well, you know, I wanted to have you share a bit of this upbringing, and you know, I got to say, the more I researched before our talk, the more I felt that, you know, a lot of elements of your life could also be a Bruce Springsteen song. You know, growing up in New Jersey, and also the fact that, you know, you now live 45 minutes away from where you grew up, or yeah?
Yeah, I actually live 10 minutes from where I grew up.
Okay.
You know, my wife and I got a place in New York City. Well, we both moved to New York City early on, and lived there on and off for, you know, 25, 30 years. We have a place in Hell's Kitchen where we run the business, and my wife was helping me run the business before we got married. And then when we had kids, we moved back into town to have all the grandparents, cousins, aunts and uncles and all that, because I travel so much, and it was a real
great.
to have those people around. So, yeah.
Well, you know, talking about family, I use that as an introduction to, as I understand it, this image is one of the first where you realized you might have an eye. You've got something, there might be something going on with you in terms of photography.
Yeah, I was in school, and you know, I was really into the photograph as a document, and I was, you know, had been given some assignments, and I was kind of feeling myself out amongst the other students, and my own self. And for some reason, this photograph to me, like, it really connected with me, and I thought to myself, there's something about it that really felt, there's such a connection between myself and the subject, and there's this just a beautiful composition, in my opinion. And then there's that little surprise of my mother's hand holding up my niece Jessica, so that so that Josh didn't drop her. And so it's Josh and Jared and my niece. Jessica, and that's my sister Robin's kids. And when I saw the photograph, I just felt like there was a lot going on in there, a lot to look at. Like I could look at this for a long time. There's a lot of story in one image, and I felt like I was onto something.
Well, those themes definitely continue as we'll see looking at a few other pictures. I got to say, I know Danny Lyon is someone you're influenced by, and I look at this picture, the cropping of the hand coming into the frame reminds me, maybe, certainly at this age you weren't aware of Danny Lyon at all, but I think there are ways of seeing that you naturally had at this point that we see later. I got to ask you,
those photographers, and certainly, I did gravitate towards him.
I'd be remiss if I didn't have you talk about the significance of a workshop in the direction of your photography.
Yeah. Well, I did quite a few workshops. The first one, it was interesting. My wife, my girlfriend at the time, went to FIT, and she was studying fashion, buying, and merchandising. And she had an opportunity to go to London to study Shakespeare and to do classes in another country. And for me, I felt like I just really, none of my family had gone to college for the most part. My dad's a house painter, our extended family, we're all blue collar people working hard. And the fact that someone could study abroad was amazing to me and inspiring. And she went, and while she was there, I was always looking at photography magazines, and I was looking at Interview magazine and Rolling Stone, and just looking at all my heroes, one of them being Annie Leibovitz. And I came across the Ansel Adams Gallery workshops that were doing a workshop in Yosemite. And Annie was one of the instructors, as well as David Hockney, which was amazing. I wasn't even really familiar with David at the time, but that's a whole long other story. He did his Polaroid series, which I'm sure people are familiar with. And it was an epic moment for me. I did the workshop. I saved my money. At the time, I was working out a 1-hour photo, and lifeguarding on the beach and just trying to make some money. And I went to the workshop, and I was just so amazed. And just such a big fan of Annie's work, especially her earlier documentary work. And she still is, to this day, one of my favorite photographers and biggest inspirations. And long story short is I got along really well with her assistant. And at the end of the workshop, she revealed that she was looking for an intern at her studio in New York City. And she asked me if I wanted to do it. And of course I was like, let me check my calendar. Okay, I'll do it. And so I was super stoked. So that was an amazing part of my life.
Well, I know you assist with a number of photographers, and we may get to talk about that before you went out on your own, but I really want to get into the stories of all of your images. People often associate you, most often, as a rock photographer. But the truth is you really got your commercial break early on with hip hop.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I worked with a lot of great photographers. I worked with Annie. I worked with Mary Ellen Mark. I worked with Stephen Meisel, Timothy White, and a bunch of others. Andrew Eccles, a lot of other photographers. It was amazing. And so when I was sort of segueing from assisting to getting some assignments. I was shooting for Spin magazine. I was shooting a little for Rolling Stone, and I got an assignment to photograph for Spin magazine, and I photographed the band Third Base hip hop group. And it was really exciting. It was an exciting time for me. It was my very first assignment for a big magazine. I was really, really nervous. Wasn't sure, could I do this? There was all these questions. It was really like the moment for me. And I photographed the band, and it was a great experience. They were very cool. They were very photogenic. They were participating. They were giving back. I got some really great photographs. And I took those images after they ran in Spin magazine. I took them to Def Jam Records because I was trying to get my portfolio in to Def Jam. So they would say, drop the book off and then pick it up. And I said, no, I really would like to come in and see you guys and say hello. So I told them I had these images. They asked if I owned them. They saw an opportunity to get these images from me. And so they had me come in, and I got there, and it was Steve Carr, who is now a film director, a lot of comedy work, and Say Adams, who is a a legendary, artist working at multimedia type of work, and his work is amazing. You should check it out. And so I met these guys. We were the same age. We were young. They had gotten this opportunity. Say was really was a graffiti artist, and they had mutual friends. He hung out with the Beastie Boys, and they knew Rick Rubin and all this stuff. And they ended up, boom, getting this job as the art directors called the Drawing Board for Def Jam. So that relationship started, and I started to get some gigs from them. And a lot of the bigger name photographers, I believe felt that hip hop was just a fad, and that it wasn't going to be around for long, and they weren't interested in taking the jobs. And I was up for anything. I was like, I just want to run some film through my cameras, and whatever you got, count me in. And they started to include me in a lot of stuff. And they liked my real sort of honest documentary style. And I feel like I developed along with these guys my style, which was like the document, the honest portrait, something really simple, a great captured moment. And then I would just like go crazy, like artful, blurry, wide open, big, huge, pull way back and have the artist be this big, give them room to art direct around it, and double exposure and like whatever I could throw at it to make it interesting. And that's where I kind of got my break. And then the next thing before we move on is that MC Search, who was the one of the guys in Third Base, said to me a couple months later, maybe a year later, and he said, "Listen, I have this artist that you have to photograph. Like, your style is really going to be well suited to him. He wants to shoot in his neighborhood where he's from." And he handed me this tape to listen to, and it said Nasty Nas. And it was the Nas Illmatic cassette. And I took it in the dark room and I listened to it relentlessly. And I called him up and I was like, you count me in, and I just let me know where I need to be and when. And it's funny how that image, that album has become epic. It's usually on everyone's top 3, if not top number 1 hip hop records of all time.
Wow. Well, Danny, I'll just move through here. You stop me when the feeling hits you and we want to talk about the stories behind a few of these. I mean, I can't go past this without you explaining how you ended up on the other side of the lens. Yeah,
this is a photograph taken from the inside of my car, which is a 1948 Pontiac. And I was photographing Bruce Springsteen. He likes to take photographs, and he was always interested in what cameras I was using and whatnot. And I was peeking in and shooting some pictures of him. And he says, "Hey, hand me that camera. Let me see that thing." I can't remember if I told him how to focus it or not. It is the rangefinder. There's no autofocus going on here, or if he already knew, but looks pretty sharp to me. Pretty good job.
You did a good job. Well, how did you come to shooting Leica? I use a variety of cameras, but as I understand it, if you only had to have one camera, it would be a Leica.
Yeah, I think you go back to all my early inspirations. Robert Frank, and certainly Bresson, and Danny Lyon and these folks, and they were like, what was the camera you always saw them with? You saw them with a Leica, and then you saw the prints, and you saw the imagery and the sharpness and the grain and the beauty and and to me it's like, it's hard to carry around a big large SLR camera where there's just puts more distance between you and the subject, and it just gets and not to say that they're not useful and completely relevant for moments where you are actually able to want to direct people, and you're really, but if you're documenting and you want to be in the moment, you want to just have something that becomes a part of you as like a third arm that you can just throw up at any moment. It was that camera for me. And so I think in like 93, I can't remember if it was 93 or 96, where I just, kept saving my money, and I bought one. I remember going down to Wall Street Camera down in New York City, buying that camera with the 50mm lens and walking out of there like I was the king.
So at this point, how much are you shooting film versus digital?
Right now?
Not now, currently.
I would say probably shooting more digital than I am film. The world's changed, and there's demand for things right away, and you try to capture things straight away, and then if I feel like I'm really in the pocket, I will then grab my film camera and shoot that. And I still shoot a lot of Polaroid. I have an old Konica Instapress. I'll pick up my Hasselblad, I'll pick up my M6, or whatever it might be, and run with it.
As we've gone through a few shots here, I think it's important to mention that you play music yourself, and that was something that's been a lifelong interest.
Yeah.
How, as a harmonica player, how do you think that affects your photography and the relationships in these shoots?
Well, it gets in the way if I'm trying to take a picture, but I have done it. I'm sure there are some photos out there. I've seen some where I'm playing somewhere and I'm like sitting in with like Willie Nelson, and then I like lean over to get a picture of it. But I think it helps me connect to the artists a little more. I think they just realize that I get it. And, I'm just so entrenched in photographing musicians. I think I feel like sometimes, people make a choice, like they want to do portraits, they want to be in the studio, they want to, that's what they're going to do, these beautiful portraits and great, I happen to like all aspects of it. I love the simple portrait. I love using my 4x5. I love to do something that's very directed. I just really, really also love being in the recording studio. I love being backstage when someone's writing a set list, being on the stage. This photograph that's up right now and this one as well, they're all taken from what I kind of call the sweet spot, which is either behind an amplifier where the crowd can't really see me, or behind the drum kit. And when I feel a moment happening, then I jump up and grab the photograph. And, that allows me to capture the relationship of the musicians to their audience and the relationship of that to the venue. And it really is a bigger picture. And it's like, you really, you have to wait for that moment to happen. This particular one of Eddie was just walking he loves to walk towards the edge of the stage and go out and visit people down that side. And then he'll go back and go stage right and visit people on that side. And then he'll go in the audience. But this was a moment where he was walking with a bottle of wine, which he'll often share with some of the fans. And I think he was on his way, and he caught me over there just about to shoot a photograph. And there's that moment where he looked right at me, and it was really a nice photograph. And this was shot on my M6 with Tri-X. And
I would encourage everyone to check out your website, DannyClinch.com, and to specifically people who are interested in concert photography to look for the shots you may have made over the years from this position or from behind the drum stand. And I got to ask you, as we look through some other shots here, have you ever been the photographer who at the front who only has 3 songs and they're out of there?
Yeah, I have. I don't like it either.
Well,
I just feel like, look, give me an opportunity, and at the end of the day, you need one photograph, and when you're standing in the pit, and there's nowadays, it used to be you'd be in the pit with 2 or 3 other people, and now you go in there, you could literally be in there with like 40 people. And what is going to distinguish you from the rest of the people that are standing there, and 90% of them have a huge long lens on. So there's one way to distinguish yourself from them. Show more of what's going on. Try and find something unique, a unique point of view that's your own.
We went through a lot of shots fairly quickly there. I want to ask you about your relationship with Phish and how that started. Take us back to the beginning of that.
I think that might have been Spin Magazine as well. I think I got an assignment from Spin, and I went out to shoot the band, and I feel like they were at a point in their career where they'd worked with a couple other photographers, and were content with what was happening, but we just connected, and right away, we connected as people, and I just liked how kind of normal they really were, and on the surface,
in spite of this picture,
when you dig in a little bit, And it took me a while to figure out what the hell were these guys were up to, and man, once I locked in, it's just like for those who don't know and would probably try to argue the fact that they are really the most inventive and chance-taking group out there. They really are. And this photograph right here of Trey that's up on the screen, I took when they played the Met, which wasn't that long ago. I wanted to pull this photograph into the mix here because, this is a band where, I could have had a job that day, and the last minute the job fell through, and I just call up the team and I go, hey, I'm going to be able to make it tonight. And they're like, okay, cool. We got a pass for you at the, will call, just go in. And then I can just, roll in. And it's just, I think they realize, most of the bands and the relationships that I have, people realize that it is important to be documented. And who do you want to be documenting? And do you trust them? And do you want to, give them the access? And does it get to a point where we can just forget that you're even there? Or if we don't forget, we don't mind that you're there.
You've shot so many bands, and there's got to be a sensitivity to the group dynamic, I imagine, especially when you are first meeting a band. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of how you photograph them as a group?
There's Judd. Yeah, I mean, of course I try to find something that I have in common with the artists. Now I have a lot in common with artists, even if I don't know them, because I've photographed so many of their heroes, of my heroes. We can talk about Bob Dylan, and we can talk about Radiohead, and we can talk about Phish or whoever it might be. I keep a relaxed set. I keep a relaxed, approach. I always have an idea rolling, something that if I only get this, I'm going to be content with what I've got. And hopefully something will, present itself that will be even better than the idea that I had, or will enhance the idea that I had. It's funny, this photograph reminds me of, it was one of the inspirations for a recent hashtag that I've been doing on my Instagram, a hashtag DC Photos of Joy. And I saw this photograph, and there's a photograph I have of Pearl Jam also that sort of inspired this, but it's, bands who are normally known as being like pretty serious, artists, and a lot of times have like a real serious look on their face. And I have like a lot of laughing photographs of these artists, I think. And, Radiohead can be known as serious artists, of which they are. But
I think I've got another one that maybe fits in with that.
Yeah.
Idea.
Yeah. And this is Newport Folk Festival. It's one of those festivals where like, it's a nonprofit. It's a great festival run by Jay Sweet, and it has a long history, and I want to support it. So I go up every year, and I go and I photograph, and they, I offer them the photographs to use to document. There's a lot of great photographers there, but like I go there, and this is the perfect example. I go there, I have my Leica, I have a 35 millimeter on my M, I have the 75 millimeter on my M6, and that's really all I need to go in and mix it up, And if I need a longer lens than that, then I'm not close enough. Yeah.
So how important has it been to you to switch up what you're shooting? I mean, you got a wide lux, and you've got it looks like an M240 with a 35 f2 and Canon on the other arm, Nikon or Canon.
Yeah, might be a Canon or a Nikon. Yeah. This is taken by Renee Humer, who works with Phish, and Dave Matthews, great photographer and just a great guy. And it's nice, when you're out there, it's like, you feel competitive, in the beginning and then you just realize it's like, you just go out there and make pictures, and the guy next to you is your comrade, and, you help him out, he helps you out. I have a lot of relationships like that with people in the pit. And he took this of me at the end of a Phish show at Madison Square Garden. So I forget what your question was, but I thought that was worth mentioning.
No, we'll get back to it. I guess here, let me phrase it a different way. when you get stuck creatively or
Yeah.
for an idea for a project, what role does gear play
Yeah.
in that?
It does. It does.
In breaking you out of it and breaking you out
It
of that.
really is. So you're somewhere and you've got one lens and, what are your other tools? What are your other creative solutions? And if you have you can change your lens, you can go tight, you can use motion, you can use lighting, you can use a silhouette, you can try a Widelux. And I don't know if anybody's seen the Jeff Bridges Widelux images, but this camera that you see above the highest one on my chest there is a Widelux, and it's got a 15th of a second shutter speed, and it's a pans as you take it. So you could actually start with a photograph of someone and whip it around and get their face on the other side as well, with all kinds of weirdness going on in between. And you're basically taking a huge chance, and it's a happy accident thing, but you really could come away with a real epic image. This is Newport Folk again. I love what I love about this photograph, and in my book, Still Moving, I have a section called Friends and Family. And I love musicians who normally don't play together, artists, together, like the camaraderie that, these people, they're a certain breed of people, and they're the ones who are lucky enough. And because I play harmonica, I'm lucky enough to get in on like a musical conversation somewhere. Somebody could be playing and I could step in and join them, and these guys all have such a great, camaraderie together. They had played together, and they recorded a track together, and this was shortly thereafter. This is at Newport Folk, and just, you can see the love. And this was part of the DC Photos of Joy hashtag that I was doing as well.
So Danny, how did this happen?
Well, if I told you, I'd
well, let me ask it a different way. How did you get invited on the bus? Well, I imagine you're on many buses, but this particular moment, I would imagine there weren't many other photographers.
No, there wasn't. It was me. It was me in the pit by myself. This was great. I was photographing Willie and Merle Haggard's last record they made together, Django and Jimmy. And we were filming at the recording studio there, Arlen Studios. And we got to see them play together. They just finished recording, and they played a set. It was it was amazing. And they disappeared, and I was hanging out outside. And again, it's a testament to relationships and treating people right, and sending gifts to people. It's all just really important part of but more importantly, the people that I meet on the road, whether it's the artists themselves or their tour manager or the lighting guy, it's just such a great, awesome family. And part of that family, of course, is Willie's wife, Annie. And Annie really looks after Willie, and she looks after me and everybody else. And she said, Danny, you're going to want to go, you should go on the tour bus right now. And I said, I should? And she's like, yeah, come on. And I was like, well, why don't you open the door so I don't feel like I'm, bum rushing the show. And she's like, they aren't even going to see you. They're locked in playing poker. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Wow. So I wandered up and I floated around there and shot a bunch of pictures. And I think the key to those scenarios, depending on how well you know somebody, is get the shot and, make sure you get it. And if you feel that little funny feeling, trust it, and then just get out,
How about the story behind this moment with Bruce?
Well, this is Bruce on Broadway. It's one of my favorite photographs I've taken recently. There's so much story in there, from, him and Clarence there on the lower left. And this was basically his mirror in the backstage area. And he decided to, put up all of his inspirations and in his life, including, his family. You can see there John Lennon and Paul Newman and Elvis and Marlon Brando and Bob Dylan. And there's a picture of him and his sister there. There's a picture right above Paul Newman of he and Patty that I actually took. So I was happy to make the mirror. And when he was doing the Broadway shows, I was pretty much the only one allowed to come and photograph for the most part. And I photographed some of the rehearsals. And on the first day, Bruce said to me, "Listen, man, I'm really excited about this. I just don't want to see you out there. I don't want to hear you out there. And I want to hear your camera, and neither does my audience." And I said, "All right, gotcha." So the first show that I shot, I made sure people were clapping or he was playing really loud when I clicked the shutter, whether it was with my 5D or whether it was with my M Leica, was still, if it was quiet in there, you could hear it. That's how his audience is. You cannot hear anything. So after the show, I said, all right, I'm going to find the right camera for this job. And I started doing some research, and I had used the Leica SL in the past, and I really loved it. I loved the feel of it. I loved actually the focal length on both of those longer lenses, the 24 to 90, and then the other one is what, the 90 to 210?
210, yep.
And they just have a little more throw, both of them, than most of the other normal ones, which made a big difference to me. And so I started messing with it, and I put it on the electronic shutter and realized nothing. You could hear nothing. You couldn't hear any of it. It was just completely quiet. And so I showed up a couple days later to one of the shows, and I asked to go back and say hi to Bruce. And so I went into the dressing room and I said, well, I got the camera. I got it. This is what we need right here. And he goes, yeah. And he's like I said, always interested in photography. And I pick up the camera and I shoot a couple of frames, and I was like, how's that? And he was like, did you shoot something yet? And I think I have the frames where I clicked, shot photos of him, like with a look on his face, like, did you shoot a picture? Because he couldn't hear anything. I said, I did. And he was like, no way, this is fantastic. Right. So he was super psyched. And then I said, well, while I'm here, like I see a good photo in this mirror right here. Do you mind if I get this image? And he was like, no, let's do it. And I shot it. And like I said, it's become one of my favorites. There's just so much story in there, including you can see me in between that little shot of that's right, his sister and I think mom and dad. So I got myself in there. So really, it's a self-portrait. It's got nothing to do.
Well, in a lot of ways, you could say that about a lot of your photographs. How do you feel about that? I mean, how do you feel about your photography being a reflection of the way you see the world? It's the way you see people, but what else is it to you? What else does it show?
I mean, I think it says a lot about me. I think it says a lot about, how what I choose to show. I mean, I shoot a lot of images, and you have to be a good editor of your own photography. And I'm interested in a soulfulness in people. I want people to look good. I want a moment. To me, a moment is the most important thing. If you're a little underexposed or your framing's a little off or whatever it might be, if the moment is there, that's what's so soulful and so important to me at the end of the day, because you want to reveal something, you want to capture a moment, you want to have somebody feel something when they look at that image.
We've got some questions about light and how you see light now. Are most of your pictures available light versus strobe, and then how over your career has the way you see light changed?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of natural light, and Tri-X and natural light was where I got my start. And just and I do remember in the beginning people looking at my portfolio and going like, man, you got to put some color in there. And I was like, no, I don't. And it didn't really get in my way. I did start to understand color better and shoot it better, but and I worked with a lot of different people who lit things in a lot of different ways, so I had a lot to draw from. Initially, I wanted to be Annie Leibovitz, and I knew I realized I wasn't going to be Annie Leibovitz. So we had different obsessions with how we work, and the same with Mary Ellen Mark and the way she lit things, and she used the on-camera flash and all that. And then I went to Stephen Stephen Meisel, who, was like a big fan of Avedon, and I saw how he was lighting things there. And Timothy White was like, stick and move and get, lighting here and quick, adjustments. And I kind of like that. I like being light on my feet and moving around and stuff. And so I took something from each one of those and added it to my own personality. And the way that I, so if I am, the Tupac image of mine that's very well known was lit in a way as a combination of what I saw Stephen Meisel do, combined with my love of Irving Penn, and as I moved on and like later on in my career, I got introduced to consistent lighting, like, like a hot light or then Kino flows. The Kino flow is, for the most part is a moving image light, and I started to light things in a way where I just didn't love always using a strobe. I like to light things where I can light the room in a way with Kino flows and a little bit of softbox here and some bounce over there, and even a lot of times just one Kino flow with some soft stuff on it, And this allowed me to, move around the room. If I lit it like almost like a video set or a film set, a movie set, you could move throughout there without making the, the artist go, oh, can you just go take a break over there while I change my lighting to that corner over there? It's something I love about that. And, sometimes I'll set up a very lit set. It just depends on the assignment, but I love to be able to stick and move. I like to be able to dance around the scenario, like dance around the person, because the light changes when you come over here, and, it's soft over here and it's almost a silhouette over there. And it's like pretty exciting.
People are asking, what kinds of photos do you take in your free time, and how?
Honestly, they aren't a whole lot different. I photograph my family relentlessly. I always, I struggled when I was pulling this work together. I didn't struggle with showing just my Leica images because I have tons. Not to say that I don't have a lot that aren't Leicas that are classic images of mine, but I have a whole series of stuff on Cuba, which is on my website. A lot of it shot with the Leica, and just other work that I do that's not music or celebrity related. I'm always shooting, and
there's a spot, Danny. There's a spot on your website called Curious or Curiosity.
Yeah, Curious. Yeah,
Curious. What explain that? What do you?
That's a little bit of that. A landscape, weird exposure, a double exposure, motion, a shot on the street. It should be flushed out more, but it is kind of that spot where I always have a camera. Like there's very, very few times that there isn't a camera within 10 feet of me. And when I don't carry it around, what happens?
Right. Invariably, there's a moment. Well, let me bring you back to a couple moments that I know I went through very quickly. And I think, we owe a bit more of a story to some of your iconic images like this of Johnny Cash.
I got an assignment to photograph Johnny Cash for a acoustic guitar cover. So I did set up the backdrop, and I got some great portraits of him, and it was incredible. And he was just a really intense but really sweet guy. And I do recall that during that part of the shoot, I asked him to play a song so that we, to play his guitar so that we could, I could photograph while he was singing. And he played a Leonard Cohen song called Bird on a Wire. And it was pretty much knocked us out. I couldn't even really hardly take pictures, but I guess I did.
Wow.
And afterwards, I asked him if I could follow him to the stage when he, before the show. And he was like, sure, whatever you want. And so this was the moment really when the band was already on stage and they were, riffing and pumping up the crowd. And, the guy was just saying, ladies and gentlemen, the man in black. And I remember him going down and playing Orange Blossom Special. And because I play harmonica, I remember he had two harmonicas in his hand and he was playing the riff on two different harmonicas. Wow. And I don't know why I didn't shoot the live show there, but I've gone through that shoot a million times and there's no live photos. I don't know why, but anyway, when, this was in '94 and Johnny wasn't exactly, beloved as he is right now. You know, there was that moment in his career where it kind of went a little south. And so Rick Rubin made the American Recordings record with him, and I was thrilled because I grew up going to see Johnny Cash, and my mom and dad played Johnny Cash, and I would bring my mom and her best friend Linda to see Johnny Cash during these years. And you could go to the Ritz in New York and it'd be half full, and you could go right up to the front and watch him play. And so I was thrilled that Rick was doing something with Johnny. So I sent Rick, who I had met through Luscious Jackson and the Beastie Boys, I sent him this photograph of Johnny Cash and said, hey man, I really appreciate, and my family appreciates you, you know, getting Johnny and bringing him back into the fold here for everyone to appreciate. And he thanked me, and they got to making the next record, and it was called Solitary Man. And everyone involved in the record saw this in Rick's studio, saw this image in Rick's studio. And they said, if we're calling this record Solitary Man, this has to be the album cover. Wow. And I got a call from Rick one day saying, hey, remember that photo you sent me? How about us using it on the cover of Johnny's new record? And I was like, are you kidding me?
Wow. Well, we'll go from Johnny Cash into the Beastie Boys here. Can you speak to the importance of the relationships beyond the artist, all the people who surround them, whether it's, you know, a stagehand or a manager? How has those relationships been important to your success?
It really is. It's really important. It's like I said earlier, the people that you meet, you know, after being on the road for 30 years, you know, some tour managers, you know, when so-and-so goes off the road, they pick up with someone else, and, you know, someone's with Pearl Jam, and then you see them with Neil Young, and then the guitar tech was with Radiohead, and now they're with, you know, the Beastie Boys. You know, it was really, it's incredible. And, you know, and if you're respectful to people, and I think that's the thing, you know, it's like, you have to have eyes behind your head. You can't be standing in the way of a guitar tech on the side of the stage when their job is to run is to run a guitar over to Mike McCready. You know, you can't be in the sight line of the person who's running monitors on the side of the stage, and so-and-so can't look over and say, hey, turn my monitor up because I'm standing in front of them. It's all these things, you know, respecting. You can't, you know, you got to ask the tour manager, you know, make sure that you're not walking in the backstage at the wrong time. There's all those things. And when you have these great relationships, people do start to help you out, you know, and say like, hey, by the way, the band's going to be rehearsing in their like jam room over there. They're going over a couple of the songs, and so-and-so is going to sit in. So you don't want to miss that, you know.
Dan, we're going to check out a few more shots specifically behind Backstage, and
Sure.
and you have a real focus. It's, you know, oftentimes people say, well, if I had the same access, I could make the same pictures. You know, people who are not nearly as experienced, and there are a lot of people in the past have had access, but they don't make the same pictures. And I'm asking, what can you try to qualify that, and maybe I guide you a little bit here. You talk about this idea of an in-between moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that there's, you know, people have something they're presenting to you, and often it's their good side, and they look good, and it's a good photograph, you know. I try to get the one like right after that, you know, or right before, you know. Oh look, I think let's use that chair over there by the window. Go ahead and, you know, and sit in that chair, and before they're comfortable, before they're set in, before they're, you know, you get that you know, you grab it, and tends, you know, they're pulling up, they have a guitar and they're pulling it up, and they just do a little tune on it, and you get that moment, and it's real, and it feels real. And I did see a question flash underneath, and I don't know who said it or what, but it was like shooting in difficult lighting situations. And I think these are all presented here. This is potentially really crappy lighting, you know. It's a puck light that's stuck in the ceiling, that's shining right down. But when you have Clarence Clemens there, and he's backlit, and the smoke is in the cigar, and it's like, it comes together, but you have to know how it's going to read, you know. And I'm tired of hearing people out of the, you know, side, you know, in the distance going like, oh, this lighting sucks. And I'm just like, man, I love it. You know, like let's just get it. make it work. You know,
Absolutely.
you challenge yourself, you know?
I look at your pictures and I often get the sense that, you know, he's buddies with all these guys. He's spending hours with them, but this picture clearly shows probably what the reality is more often than not.
Well, you know, you always want to be the guy who gets the call to have all the access and stuff. And then sometimes you're not, you know, and, you know, this was a moment when it was the concert for New York City. It was at Madison Square Garden. And I, you know, I tried my best to get photo access to it, and it just wasn't happening. And I won't throw anybody under the bus, but somebody gave me a pass, and I ended up, you know, backstage, and I had my Leica, and that was it. You know, I was wandering around. I had a pocket full of film, and I was, you know, catching what I could. And I happened to be backstage when the other photographer was pulling together a group shot of everybody there, and I was extremely jealous that I wasn't the guy shooting the group shot. And I noticed while you know, you're waiting for everybody to come through, you know, people will show up and they're like, we're going to do it all in these road cases right here, and we're just waiting for everybody to show up. I mean, it was, you know, Bruce Springsteen and Elton John and, you know, the Who and the Stones and you know, Bon Jovi. It was just everybody, you know. And I was waiting there, and I looked, and people started to trickle in, and they were starting to move people out of the way. And I see Keith Richards, you know, Pete Townsend, Mick Jagger, John Entwistle, and Roger Daltrey, and they're all sitting there shooting the shit there on the you know, on these road cases, waiting for everyone else to show up. And I kind of look around and I'm like, man, there's a shot there. Like, I kind of start like casually making my way over there. And the only problem was that Roger Daltrey his back was to me. And as I got closer, I was like, well, I still got to take the shot, even if Daltrey's back is to me. And so I pick up my camera and I shoot one frame, and all in like slow motion, as you would imagine if it was a movie. My movie that I was in at the time. And I have clicked the first frame, and as I go to click the other frame, somebody says something to Daltrey, and he turns around. And at the same moment, this woman who was there to keep, you know, to organize things, brought up her clipboard and said to me, no, you can't be taking photographs here. And I felt like I felt like I got it. And I was like, okay, you know, and I like just turned around and walked away. Of course, I had to wait, you know, a week for my film to come back.
Dave, we're going to look at a number of images that speak to that idea of being ready, whether in this case with Dylan, your music knowledge benefited you. And we'll look at a few others that just you were simply ready to get the moment when it happened. Can you speak to how this experience with Dylan?
Well, the Dylan was amazing. There's a story about March 16th and how the thread of that date kind of goes through my life. And when I sent my Discovery In book, my first book, to Springsteen, I had recently done a shoot with John Mellencamp. And so I sent this book to Bruce and the woman who runs his, who at the time was designing, Sandy Churon was designing all his tour books and album packaging. I sent it to her to give to Bruce. I had just done a shoot with Mellencamp. Larry Fremantle was Mellencamp's publicist, and he said, boy, I really like your style. It's loose, it's comfortable. I think Dylan, I work with Dylan also. I think he would love your style and would, you know, you guys should do a shoot together. And I was like, wait, man, say the word. Yeah. And so funny enough, on the very same day, March 16th, I get a call in the morning from Jeff Rosen, who's Dylan's manager. And he says, very dryly, I represent a singer-songwriter. His name is Bob Dylan. You might have heard of him. And I was like, well, yeah, in fact I had. And he said, well, Larry Jenkins says you're the man to shoot Bob Dylan. And I said, well, Larry's a very smart man. We should listen to him, you know? And we had a great conversation, and I got hired to shoot Bob Dylan. And I was telling the story and to someone else in the afternoon when I was at a meeting at MTV, believe it or not, and my phone rang, and it was Sandy Churon. And she said, hey, I'm at a rehearsal with Bruce Springsteen, and he just saw your book and wants to know if you want to come down to Fort Monmouth and photograph the band. He's just got the E Street Band back together. And I was like, I literally was speechless. And that was on the very same day I got a call to shoot Dylan in the morning and Springsteen in the afternoon. Wow. And so then this is from that shoot, and the Johnny Cash Solitary Man and the Willie Nelson Milk Cow Blues records that I both shot the same year came out. One of them came out on that date, and the other one came out on like a couple of days after. So there was that March 16th. And then the Tom Petty shoot I did came on March 16th. And I'd never shot Tom Petty. But Dylan loved where we were shooting. And it was the Ambassador Hotel in LA. And there was a lot of history there, from the Rat Pack playing in the Coconut Grove room to RFK being assassinated in the kitchen there. He loved the place, and he wandered all around and stayed for like hours longer than he said he would, just to wander around and explore. And I just followed him around with my camera, and we wandered around through the space, looking out the windows and peeking in closets and behind curtains and stuff.
Now, I want to share a few more of the moments that where you've gotten interaction. And I think that was a word that, you know, your pictures, there's always something happening. Even in a portrait, there's something happening. There's movement, or, you know, people are involved with each other.
Well, this was when some artists were doing a concert in support of Barack Obama before he became president, and I went to photograph. I went with Bruce and was hanging around, and I heard somebody say, you know, there's a lot of waiting around when you're photographing in these situations, and you know, it's not all good times and amazing moments. There's hours and hours upon hours of standing in the hallway, and you have to go to the bathroom, and you don't dare walk away because you know something's going to happen as soon as you do. And I heard somebody say, hey, Bruce, Billy wants to go over that tune you guys are going to do together. And I was like, oh, okay. And they started, Bruce walked down the hallway, and I was like, well, I'm going. And I just followed him down the hallway into Billy's, you know, backstage room, and they started going over, you know, this tune together, and I got some photos of it. And Billy was playing air piano and stuff, and they were going back and forth. It was pretty cool.
Dave, that seems to be a consistent quality you have, that when there's an opportunity to go, whether invited or not, you'd go. I mean, you ask many times, but a lot of times if there's an opening, you take it and go. And so you get the moment.
It's timing, you know, and it's like, you know, it's a bit of passive aggressive in a way. It's not even that. It's respect. If people can feel that you're bringing respect, and you walk in the room, not like, I own this room and I'm taking this picture, you know, some people do that. And I just tend to be like, I'm here, I'm respectful. I grab a couple of shots, I go hide in a corner, and I lay out for a little bit until I see another moment happening. And then I get in there. And if I get a sideways glance, I think there's an unspoken rule between people. And you get the sideways glance, and then you just duck out, you know, and you just hope that you got it, you know? Yeah, this was Jane's Addiction was playing Madison Square Garden. I think it was a Halloween or something. I'm not sure. It was around Halloween. But I had gotten to know Perry over the years, and he's such a great entertainer and you know, just a great artist. You know, when you think back to what he's done in his life in terms of starting Lollapalooza and just really bringing the festival back to America. And this was a really cool moment where he was putting his makeup on, and I again asked if I could go back and shoot a couple of pictures, and he was fine with it. And you can see my elbow in the very back corner of this photograph. But I saw the the two reflections in him, and managed to get it. Wow. So I love this photograph.
There's a video out there. You're going to have to remind me who made it, called The Clinch Method. And in preparing for this, I'm trying to dissect and figure out what are the knowledge nuggets, right, that we can share with the audience. And the thing from both that video and certainly the stories you've told today, it's all about relationships.
Yeah. Ryan Corey made that film, and he did a great job. And it's, yeah, it's 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 about relationships. It really is. I mean, when it comes down to it, and you know, just being respectful to people. You know, like Joni Mitchell and Brandy Carlisle. Again, Brandy and I did the music video for her for The Joke, and we became friends there. And it's funny. There's a certain point where every time she was doing something epic, I was there, and I think shortly after this moment, she came over to me and she said, you know, Danny, I got to tell you, every time something epic happens, you're always there, and I really appreciate you being there, you know. And it is like, you know, for a while there, you feel like you're intruding, and then once you cross that line into we're all in this together, and that she was so grateful that I got this photograph of them together, you know.
So you've shot the Grammys for how many years?
It's 16 years. I had shot the Grammys up for 16 years. This photograph I love, and it's got a good story behind it. And basically what would happen is I would set up a very simple classic portrait. It wasn't like a step and repeat or anything. It was beautiful, simple backdrop. Again, inspired by my love of like the Irving Penn and Annie's beautiful portraits on a simple background. So what happens is in the morning, there's pre-telecast. People win a lot of the sort of things that aren't put on the telecast, best kids, you know, record, and, you know, traditional blues records, etc. And then they, you know, but then some artists would win like maybe multiple Grammys. So if they won during the pre-telecast for something that wasn't on TV, they would then wait till the end and see if they won a couple of Grammys. And so that year, B.B. King won a couple of Grammys. And at the end of the night, there's a bit of a logjam, a bit of a line back there because all the big stars, you know, who win all come back. And to be honest, they won't stay in line for too long. So you get a little nervous if you look back in the line and you see a bunch of heavy hitters behind you. And in this moment, I was photographing B.B. King, and you know, everybody's, you know, usually locked in. My assistants are all locked in on who I'm photographing, and we're, you know, distracting them and capturing them and getting the moment and changing cameras and all that. And I got this feeling that people weren't looking at B.B. King, and they weren't paying attention. They were looking behind me. And so I kind of stopped, and I'm a big blues fan, so I was really locked into B.B. King. I was super excited, and I had worked with him several times, so we knew each other a little bit. And I turn around behind me and I look, and there is Paul McCartney and like Dave Grohl, and who knows, maybe Beyonce and Jay-Z, for all I can remember. But after I saw Paul McCartney and Grohl, like I was like, oh, okay. Like I got a little nervous that people would leave, and so I turned to Paul and said, "Hey, Paul, Sir Paul, I just would love to finish photographing Mr. King, and you know, and then I'll get you guys over for your picture." And I said, of course, you know B.B. King, right? And Paul looked at me and he said, you know, believe it or not, I've never met B.B. King. And I was like, what? I said, well, allow me. And I walked over and I introduced Paul McCartney to B.B. King. And as usual, I had my Leica over my shoulder, which is sort of my go-to. I could be shooting all different cameras. I usually have my Leica there in case I pass my camera. I'm so much about the moment. I don't like to be left without a camera in my hand. So if I hand my Hasselblad off, or if I hand even my other Leica off, I want to have a Leica. And I had my M6 and I just pulled it up, and I got that moment where they had met and were just sort of admiring each other.
And so much of your work is now associated with Bruce Springsteen. Can you speak to why you think it is that you guys click? You know, why you work so well together?
You know, I feel like you know, we're both from New Jersey. First of all, we actually, I don't know if you can find the photo of Bruce and my dad, if it's on my website. My wife's going to find it for us in the book, and then I'll show it to you guys. Okay. So anyway, you know, we're all kind of cut from the same cloth, you know? And when we met, you know, he just liked this, I don't know, he was interested in photography. He was always so laid back. And so, you know, I admired him so much. And we just, funny enough, we kept working together, and he would do an album and he would have me do it. And then, you know, the next album, maybe someone else would do it, and he would come back and be like, you know, I feel like this didn't say what I wanted it to say. I like the photos, but, you know, I really wanted to say this. And he would come back to me, and then I would do some more shooting with him. You know, it's just, I'm so inspired by people, like, I don't want to get sidetracked, but I'm inspired by people like Bruce and, you know, Dave Matthews and Pearl Jam and Foo Fighters and Phish and all these people who give back to their community, and like they're really about giving back to the community. And, you know, Bruce shows up in Asbury Park on his own, you know, to go to the Wonder Bar and have a beer, and, you know, he doesn't have security guards or anything, and he'll ride up in his motorcycle and he'll park on the side, and it's just like, and, you know, we really kind of come from the same area, and he, you know, a lot of Bruce's, you know, friends, yeah, he's friends with Tom Hanks and, you know, Eddie Vedder and stuff like that, but his buddies growing up still are out hanging out with him, you know.
Wow.
He felt like there was, I guess, some mutual respect and love for you know, honest
storytelling, and it comes from a genuine place.
So
what you both do.
Here's this photo of my dad
Here.
and Bruce. Let's see if I can. There it is. Which one's my dad? Oh yeah, it's that guy on the right.
Great.
But anyway, they both showed up for, you know, they had never met, and they showed up, and they're both wearing flannel shirts. You know, my dad's got a cigarette tucked behind his ear, or a pencil or something. And anyway.
Well, Dave, the time we've got left, let's see. There's one other picture I know we wanted to talk about. John Prine and your experience with John Prine. Yeah.
Well, my first introduction to John Prine was Bonnie Raitt doing Angel from Montgomery. And, you know, I got to meet her years and years ago. And then I got to meet John through Jason Isbell. And the minute I met John, and when people like that are such legends, and you expect them to be different than they are. You expect them to be, I don't know, not as friendly or uninterested in what you have to say, because they're so worldly wise and they're so smart. And it's the same way with Springsteen. And you know, John was like immediately friendly to me, immediately curious about what I was about. And just once he sussed me out and decided that he liked me, like we were just really, I felt like I really knew him, and I felt like he knew me and understood me. And the same with his wife, Fiona, and his family. And like, I just felt like I knew him forever. And then I was asked to shoot his last record, Tree of Forgiveness. And man, I was just so grateful that it worked out and that I was able to do it. And then he was at Newport Folk all the time. And I mean, it's just incredible, really.
Well, Danny, this has been really enlightening. I want to make sure that people are able to get in touch with you. And so we're not quite wrapped up yet. Let me bring up, because I want to ask you about the 4 books that you have. And I know people can order those through your website or at Transparent Gallery. How has your approach to your work changed now that you are in a position of, you know, when you have a collection, being able to make a book?
You know, Discovery Inn, I literally, we put prints up on the wall, and just started push pinning them and moving them around.
So for you, the process of making a book, the physicality of making those small proof prints, you got to touch things, right? You're not doing it digitally.
Great. Yeah. It was a great, you know, Craig Kenerick helped design it and edit it with me, and my friend Jeff Dotchis. Those 2 guys funded the book, and it was an incredible thing to do. And it was printed at Steinauer Press, which was up in Vermont, and was like one of the real old school presses, like real, like no digital. It was all done, and it was amazing. Then I went to the Ironbird Flies, and my friend Elizabeth Grubaugh designed that book. And that was all the images that I shot during the Beastie Boys Concerts for a Free Tibet. It's a really wonderful book. I feel like a lot of people aren't familiar with it, and when you crack it open, there's really a lot of great stuff. Beck and Bjork and Rage Against the Machine, Beastie Boys, of course. Eddie Vedder, on and on and on.
Hey, you've got Motor Drive there? You got it in your hand?
Yeah, I do.
I'm going to let people see a big screen just for a moment, because I think what it is a culmination of so many of the things that we started with at the beginning of this conversation, of things that are in your life.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you go, from the first book to the second to the third, which was my buddy, Stefan Nedzvetsky, who I work with on the John Barbados campaigns, designed the Still Moving book. And it was great to throw the work at him and say, here are the images, put it together. And then, and he was also the one that would say to me, when you're editing, and I would say, come on, I love this photograph of Springsteen, and he would say like, yeah, I'm sure you had a good time taking it, but it's not your best photograph, and he wasn't afraid to do that. So that was fun. And then we kind of went backwards to the beginning. And my friend Alex Nowak and I, designed this book. He designed it, but we, creative directed it together, and we decided to do a book called Motor Drive, which was a play on obviously cars and anything with a motor and a camera. And we made it. It's bound with like the pleather that you would find in an old like Chevy Impala from the 70s. And then you open it up, and there's this was so much fun. There's like, the inside is like kind of like those old illustrations that you'd get in their
absolutely. Yeah, it's a beautiful.
We did 340. It's an edition of 340, and that was in honor of Tom Morello's Dodge Demon, which has a 340 cubic inch Mopar engine.
Wow.
Each one is editioned and numbered, and this is good. This is Phish in front of an old car. So, Willie Nelson on his tour bus. Tom York on his tour bus. Chuck Berry in front of an old Cadillac.
Yeah, there's just excellent moments in there. I mean, it's one of those books that I think you got to see in person, but it's more reason why people should stay in touch with you at your Instagram here. And then also, when we are all able to get out and be about again, it's striking to me that one of the things you share in common with Bruce Springsteen and many of the artists that you shoot is this idea of building community. And I'm a guy who lives in Florida, and I want to come to New Jersey and come visit the gallery. And I think that's probably the case for many people around the world. So you've taken things beyond photography, and it's about people connecting. And I certainly see that with what you're doing there.
Yeah. It was, do I have a minute to talk about it? The gallery?
Absolutely. Sure. Please.
My wife and I spent a lot of time in Asbury Park, and, we become friends with a lot of people around there, and they built, iStar built the Asbury Hotel, and it's a great little spot there. And they had this big, beautiful room where that was empty. And things were really just starting to, this is like 4 years ago, things were really starting to hit there in Asbury. And they said, would you mind, do you want to put up a gallery in this space as a pop-up for a couple of months? We just want to, bring a little love to the space and see how it goes. And so we agreed. And at the time, my wife and I had a friend named Tina Karekis, who had a mid-century modern secondhand store up on the boardwalk, and she had just lost her lease and had all this great furniture and art and all that stuff. And long story short, she agreed to come and run the gallery, bring her mid-century modern furniture and her sense of style. And we decided that it wasn't going to be a white glove space. It was going to be a space that you could come and hang out. You could sit on the furniture. We said we need a back line there. So we got a drum kit, some amplifiers from Supro, and some guitars from Supro, and it's a bass guitar. And we started having live music there. And so it was really it became a place for like community. People weren't just coming to look at the art, people were coming to be a part of something, and all sorts of people would come through and play there, from local artists, like Rachel Anna Dobkin and Low Light and Mercury Brothers and Terra Dente, and like all just amazing. And then other artists who are coming through Asbury and playing at the Stone Pony, Jesse Mallon and Gary Clark Jr. They come in and do a set at the gallery, wow, in the afternoon. G Love. I mean, it is amazing. And it's become Danny, a place where people listen. They listen to the music. They don't, they're not talking. You can see here that it's incredible. And so that is Transparent Clinch. So you would follow our Instagram at Transparent Clinch. We also have a Facebook. And we're thankful to iStar and the Salt Hotel for giving us the space.
Well, Danny, I can't thank you enough for the time and the stories. And I think whether it's from a photography standpoint, music, or building community, you're an inspiration to a lot of people. And if I could push my luck just a little bit here, and I haven't talked about the Tangiers Blues Band, and could you play us out?
Sure. Yeah.
As we say goodbye, for the people that stuck with us the whole time.
Blues Band. We need more followers. TBBNYC. And we've had, this is who sat in with the Blues Band: Eddie Vedder, Bruce Springsteen. You might have heard of him. We've had Gary Clark Jr., Nicole Atkins, Brandy Carlisle, Jack Johnson, Dave Grohl, Zach Brown, Pres Hall Jazz Band. Oh man, the Tangiers Blues Band and the Preservation Hall Jazz Band is where it's at, right there. All right, well, here we go.
Danny, thank you.
Got a high five?
Well, see you later, everybody.
High five, everybody. Thanks for having me. I loved it.